Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Inside Movies Galore. It is a new year, and as we are starting out this year, we are starting off with a film from 1988, directed by a John McTiernan, called Die Hard. Who wants to go and tell me the synopsis? Katie, did you want to go on and talk about the film?
Sure. We could go ahead and introduce everybody first, though. I'm Katie Cadaver. You originally heard from our host, David Strage, and we're also joined by Red Raven.
Hi.
Septim Sin.
Hello.
Kotobuki Jake.
Hi.
Dane Kyle.
Howdy.
And Dustin.
That's me.
Okay,
Right.
So everybody's here. So we are talking about Die Hard. So I will read you guys the Die Hard synopsis that I actually got off the back of the Blu-ray. And
Right.
it says, high above the city of LA, a team of terrorists has seized a building, taken hostages, and declared war. But one man slips away unnoticed, an off-duty cop named John McClane. And now he's the only chance anyone has. A crackling action thriller from beginning to end. Die Hard explodes with heart-stopping suspense. So that's a super great 80s movie synopsis for you all of Die Hard.
It's certainly not wrong.
And while I have you here on the floor, Katie, was this a rewatch or a first time that you were that you had seen the film?
It's technically a rewatch for me. However, I probably have not seen this movie in its entirety as an adult. I think there's so many like pop culture references to it that I always recall the high points of the movie, but when we talked about doing it, I thought, wow, I don't actually know the full story from beginning to end. So it was kind of like watching it for the first time, I guess first time as an adult. So rewatch, but first time watch, and my overall impressions, I think it definitely holds up. Seems like it's probably one of the best action movies to come out of the 80s, I think. Not a favorite Christmas movie for me necessarily, but definitely ranks high for action for sure.
Okay. Going over to Dane, was this a first time watch for you, or was this a rewatch for you?
Rewatch. I'd seen this a couple different times. As far as a Christmas movie, I have it in the Christmas section just because why not? If not that, then I would have put it in the pure action section. And I specify that because like if it's something like Terminator, which is technically sci-fi action, I default to the sci-fi section. If it's something else, then I put it in that other genre. But as far as pure action goes, I think Die Hard's quite possibly the best pure action movie ever made. Just because it works on the page, great script, very well executed, great tension, great main character who's not invincible by any means, a great hero-villain relationship, just, could go on, but that's what we're here to do.
Okay. Going over to Red Raven, was this a first time watch or a rewatch for you?
This was a first time watch, and I really liked it, except for the fact that it was pretty long. I don't really like movies that drag on.
Okay.
But since it was action, it didn't feel that long, but it was still a pretty long movie. But I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great 80s action movie.
Okay. Going over to Dustin. Why don't you tell me whether this was a rewatch or a first time watch?
It's Die Hard. It was sort of hard to conceive of somebody having not seen Die Hard. But I actually agree with Raven a little bit. It's like this movie was a lot longer than I remembered it, but it moves pretty quick. So I mean, this is maybe I don't know. I've probably seen this something like 10 times in my lifetime. But I was surprised to look at the runtime because it seems a lot shorter than it actually is.
Well,
and it's a pretty solid action movie. Like it's a lot of people's favorite action movie, and it's pretty understandable why. I think wasn't this Bruce Willis's like first really big role too? Like, isn't this why he's famous? Pretty much.
Pretty much.
He was on Moonlighting, I think, on TV before that. But as far as
the hell is
movies,
that?
yeah.
he was in an unsuccessful Howard Hawks, either before or after this. I'm not sure whether it was after or before, but yeah.
But you're talking about Hudson Hawk, and that was after this.
Brandon's favorite movies, isn't it?
I love Hudson Hawk.
Yeah, he was on the show. It was a TV show, Moonlighting, which I've never watched, but he was on that for the 80s before this, I think. And then supposedly Bruce Willis had a cameo in the movie Driller Killer, the Abel Ferraro film, supposedly.
Okay.
But that was before he was famous.
I cannot
Moving
confirm that.
on over to Brandon. Why don't you tell us, was this a first-time watch or a rewatch for you?
Well, this is my first time watching it on Blu-ray.
Okay.
I've watched it many
first
times.
time for everyone.
Actually, I remember, what's weird is I remember watching an introduction back in the late 80s, early 90s maybe. It's fuzzy in my mind. On one of the movie channels, and they had one of those people who was announcing the movies, and he was doing these like movie themed foods, like joke foods, and they called it Pie Hard. And ended up hitting people in the head with pies with like bricks in them or something like that. It was funny back at the time, I'm sure. But it was a very memorable film from the time I remember watching it at first, or what vague time period that was, to the many times I have watched it since. On grainy VHS, poorly kept satellite signal, or on freshly tuned Blu-ray.
Going over to Kabuki, Jake, why don't you tell me whether this was a first-time watch or a rewatch?
Well, I have to admit, I've never seen it on any three of the formats that he just mentioned. I've only seen it on DVD. But the film, I had not seen it when I was younger. I was a very weird child of the 80s. A lot of the films that people think, like you were saying, Dustin, like you didn't grow up with that. There are a lot of those films that I never saw until college or later, and I was able to catch up some of them. But Die Hard, I think this may have been my third time. I think. But the first time I saw it, I remember very distinctly what triggered it. If some of you may be familiar with the AFI lists that came out, the 100 years lists, and they did the 100 years, 100 heroes and villains. And I'm sure John McClane was on the heroes list, but I totally ignored that. But Hans Gruber just made the villain list. And I had no idea Alan Rickman was even in the movie. And he had played, and he had made the list, and I was like, okay, I got to see this. And so that was what triggered that. And incidentally, this was Alan Rickman's first American film. And I think it was his first film. I think in Britain he had done stage and television. So that was pretty notable first there. I mean, what better way to start your film career, yeah?
Yeah, he did not hit it big until he was in his 40s.
Yeah. But, all right.
Me, myself, I think I first saw this on TNT when it came on cable, and it was a hell of a lot longer on cable when you had commercials and all that jazz. But I don't remember it also being as long as it was on DVD. Now this is probably my third time seeing it on DVD since owning it. So it's actually been quite some time since I've actually seen it in its entirety. So, in a sense, it was like it was fresh and fresh for me. Not that that I hadn't seen it before, but I remembered the highlights, like Katie said. But rewatching it in its entirety, it gave me a fresh perspective about some of the characters and whatnot. So, cool. So, following the scripts, what did we think about the character of John McClane?
Well, it's sort of the prototypical Bruce Willis character, at least for most people.
Well, and the prototypical action movie protagonist, at least as far as American action films.
Well, wasn't he kind of like the first portrayal of like the everyman's hero? He's kind of a pretty basic guy, and I think before that, we're used to like Schwarzenegger, Rambo, Stallone type characters, and Bruce Willis was just much of a more average guy type of action hero.
It looked like it looked like I could meet him on the street, as my voice leaves me. Sorry, guys.
Right.
In a way, his character was kind of reminded me of Dano on Hawaii Five-0 a little bit.
Well, and they do a really great job of showing, this ties into plot points. They do a really good job of showing his vulnerability right away with getting on the airplane in the start of the movie, where it shows that he's afraid to fly. So it shows he's vulnerable and just kind of really makes him relatable, I think.
Not to mention the fact that he's barefoot through most of the movie.
Yes, yet another way to make him vulnerable.
I actually think that he was one of the very first wisecracking heroes that you got to see. I mean, he had the best one-liners, and he was pretty much one of the few that had the one-liners at the time. I mean, maybe like people like Indiana Jones or something like that, but not quite the same in that sense.
Yeah. Well, Dirty Harry Callahan had a few things like that, but it didn't fit the mold of what we think of as the action movie one-liner today.
Oh yeah, I would definitely say that there were definitely some fresh one-liners for 1988 at that time. I mean,
hardly anything is fresh nowadays. Said this movie's been quoted.
Of course,
it all really holds up well.
Of course, I remember playing the PlayStation trilogy game that came out around that time too. Which I remember having to have a specific gun to play the third game. So it was. Not only was it a good action movie, but it had a good marketing thing behind it too. I think so. At least at the time that I remember. So, what do we think about his estranged wife? What do we think about their relationship?
She was kind of a plot device, I think. Like, we didn't really see a whole lot from her.
It was just a good setup. I think really our opposite of John McClane is Hans Gruber. That's really our opposite. I think the wife is just kind of there to set up a reason for him to be in this building and kind of a tactic for them to, something to use against him. But other than that, like, really his opposite is really Hans Gruber, and I think Hans Gruber deserves more of the discussion.
You guys are talking, though, about good one-liners. I think she did get one of the better one-liners, and that's when she went in as a representative for all the people out there. And Gruber said, "What idiot put you in charge?" And she's like, "You did when you killed my boss."
As far as the one-liners, yeah, like the writing in this movie is so good that they use the element of comedy so well in here that yeah, I think that's such good writing.
Yeah, well, any comedic relief that's in there never really feels like it's out of tone with the rest of the piece, and it's not
timed perfectly.
Well, yeah, it's not like a Schwarzenegger line. It feels like
organic.
Yeah, it feels organic, and even with John McClane as a character, I mean, the terrorists derisively refer to him as cowboy, but he is like definitely in the mold of somebody like John Wayne.
Actually, though, the wife does have a weird duality. In a way, she kind of represents the strong female character that we see a lot more in film today. But at the same time, she also represents the weak princess character who has to be saved by the strong male character. So it's kind of a weird duality that we see. Because she presents herself as very strong and independent, but there also seems to be a theme of, well, that's not, that was a mistake throughout.
Well, to me, one of her best lines was when one of the henchmen came down, and she was like, "It has to be John." John McClane, because nobody makes anyone else crazy but John.
Nobody but John can make someone that angry. Something like that.
Yeah. So, speaking of characters, the guy who plays Carl from Family Matters.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'm just gonna call him Winslow. Like that's who the character was. Sergeant Powell in this.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it's interesting. In our video last night, Brandon and I made the observation that this is kind of a buddy cop film. In a way, these two have sort of a buddy cop thing going on, even though they don't meet until the end of the film. And that was kind of an interesting little bit that they had there.
But they're not investigating the cult of They're not investigating a furry cult yet, though.
Does anyone really feel like Sergeant Al Powell's wife was really pregnant?
Yeah.
Yeah, he mentions it later.
Why not?
He did mention it again later when he was talking to. He first mentions it at the store when he's buying the Twinkies or whatever. Yeah. Then he mentions it again later when he's talking to John.
No, I don't think he was buying the Twinkies for his wife, however.
Right.
I thought he
That's
was.
where it's kind of like the joke is kind of like, oh, is he just making that up because he wants to eat them himself? But then no, he really does mention her later.
Yeah,
being pregnant.
It is really sad reflection on the LA law enforcement that he is easily the most competent one. He's the only one that's willing to believe McClane at all. And
right, and he's a desk jockey or whatever he says.
Exactly. And everyone else is just awful in it. And it's especially the feds. I mean, talking about cowboys.
Which I think
don't they blow up?
The car does, yeah. But I was gonna say the lead guy who gives the main cop a lot of trouble was also the principal in The Breakfast Club, if I recall.
Which one?
Does Barry Manilow know you raided his wardrobe?
Yep, that guy. And so, speaking of great characters and just a testament to the great writing, the limo driver, you think that he's going to be just this nothing throwaway character or maybe just some, cheap comic relief. And he has some funny moments, but even he gets some good stuff to do. And that's a testament to how good the script is.
His name was Argyle.
Mm-hmm. That's a great name.
Apparently, it is also a testament to moonlighting because they supposedly had to had to boost everyone's role because Bruce Willis was just tired from the show. So that ended up being very good for the movie's favor because you got more well-rounded characters, which is really cool. But
I also heard that he was filming both Moonlighting and Die Hard at the same time, like doing Moonlighting during the day and Die Hard at night.
That's possible.
It definitely helps show his weirdness as the character, which kind of feeds into that everyman idea that this guy's tired.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the fun things about the characters in this is it seems like everybody had like some little bit or like gimmick to them. Like everybody got like a little bit of screen time. Like even the goons. Like a lot of the goons were kind of cool to watch.
Yeah, they all had distinct looks and personalities, which is also refreshing because a lot of movies, well, action movies specifically, but movies in general that have any kind of henchman of any kind, they tend to either look exactly the same or they're just kind of nondescript. Each one of these people looked different. They had pretty clear personalities, and you could tell them apart from each other, and they had clear roles, which was great.
Like Huey Lewis.
I liked how they weren't all muscle too. Like you had the computer nerd that played by Clarence Hilliard. He was like a whole different sort of villain mixed into the batch.
Well, yeah, he was like kind of a computer hacker, wasn't he?
Yeah, he's like the tech nerd villain.
And
Those
then
are always fun archetypes.
Well, what do we think of Hans Gruber as the character?
He's a great villain.
Yeah.
Probably one of the best villains I've seen in a action movie. And I think also what made him good was that he was kind of likable at the same time. Like I enjoyed the scenes that he was in. I looked forward to, when he was going to be on next or what he was going to do. So I think he won me over probably.
I think the best scene that I could say that Hans Gruber was in was when he acted like he was one of the victims to John McClane's character, and totally duped him, for a moment into telling him that who he was. You know what I mean?
From what I understand, that scene was added on later when they realized that Alan Rickman could do an American accent. I think they didn't know that at first, so they sort of added that on later.
Right. The one of my absolute favorite scenes is one with Gruber, and this is why it was such perfect casting. Ruben was pretty much the one of the best actors when it comes to unbridled sarcasm. Like he can do sarcasm like nobody. And I love this scene with the tool Ellis, who goes in there all like, I'm going to negotiate. I'm going, this is what I do.
Yeah.
He just
He goes in there and he makes these totally obvious observations, and Gruber's just sitting there like, really? You thought of that yourself, did you? And it's like just the right amount of sarcasm to where anyone more intelligent than Ellis would know. But Ellis just doesn't.
He's just like flattered. Yeah.
I love it.
So good.
Yeah,
that's that charm I was talking about that won me over.
Yeah, that character always bothered me, Ellis. He's the kind of person who wanted to punch in the face.
Oh, as soon as you see him in the beginning of the movie, you're like, yeah, this guy's gonna die. He's a total douche.
Yeah, he's just kind of like that sleazeball salesman that you just want to. Okay, just go away already.
Like that seems to be kind of a trend in some of like these hostage like action movies. There's always somebody who tries to what's the right word for this? Who tries to like play it off, or it's like, hey, yeah, I'll get us out of this. I don't know what I'm doing, but I can pull it off. Or It's my train
I
of thought.
believe the
Just
term
lost
you're
track
looking
of.
for is cocksure.
That is probably correct. That's not
And
normal.
hopped up on cocaine.
Well, it was the 80s, and he was a businessman, and it was a party, so there was probably cocaine in there.
I think they
He
showed
was the
him.
only one snorting, though.
Well, there's always somebody who tries to leverage it like to their own advantage and like come out the hero, and it usually doesn't go so well.
What did we think about the paparazzi character, where he actually went into the McLean's children's homes, and he did
Sure, the other Kirk, the William Atherton. Yeah, it's the '80s. William Atherton. You know he's playing a dick. Yeah, and he really does.
Well, when he did that, you can kind of tell that it's going to get our main characters in trouble. Like, I couldn't remember. It had been a while, so I couldn't remember precisely what happened. So for a while, I thought they were going to like show pictures of like the wife on TV, and that's how Gruber would make the connection that she was his wife. But it's a lot more subtle than that. When he sees her react, and then he notices the photo, and he flips up, and it's like, "Hey."
Well, and all that foreshadowing, like when she turns the photo down in the beginning of the movie, like it ends up having such an impact later, and it actually saves him from, and her using her maiden name. It actually saves John for quite a while.
Yeah, although then again, like they don't know what he looks like until Gruber encounters him when he's planting the. Well, we didn't really do a spoiler warning, but
had they known that Holly was his wife, they would have used her right away. She would have been a pawn right away, and it took a while.
Just so you know, spoiler warning.
Yeah, a little late for the spoiler warning now.
Well, hey, we're trying. Well, my point is that without them, my point is that if they don't know what McLean looks like, how are they going to recognize her in the photo with him if they don't know what he looks like? That was the point I was trying to make.
Red Raven, if there was a favorite character that you could think of from the film, what would it be?
Oh, I don't know.
Who did you like the best?
I guess it was cool to see the cop from Family Matters. I liked him the most.
Okay.
And then the guy, he also was in the Ghostbusters movies.
Are you Thornburg? Yeah, like I said, that guy.
And he was in Biodome, I believe.
Yeah. Wasn't William Atherton also in Real Genius? Didn't he play the total dick in that movie too?
Yeah, he played the bad guy in that one. But
The
they
Real
filled his house with popcorn.
Buster, Die Hard.
And he was like the scientist guy in Biodome.
Right.
Those are probably the two that stick out.
We could probably move on to special effects. I think we covered like all the major characters, didn't we?
Yeah, I think we got most of them.
Sure. So
The
what
important ones.
of the special effects of the film? I mean,
Explosions.
The explosions were good. They
This
were very good.
This movie has great effects. Like everything is completely believable. Like even like the more I'd almost want to use stunts rather than effects for a lot of the things that we saw. Because a lot of them are just like really elaborate like action stunts.
Like the fact that he just went down the elevator shaft holding on to just a machine gun.
Right. Definitely, it wouldn't have gotten where it got without pretty great stunt work. Definitely.
And all of it still looks really good today. Like there was nothing where I was like, "Oh yeah, 1988, I can totally tell." There was none of that really. It all looked really, really good still.
When Gruber falls off the building, like the composite or whatever they're doing, like that looks kind of like
It looks a little old, but I mean, other than that,
it's still iconic though.
Yeah, I mean, it looks slightly phony because of just like how they put the shot together.
Because Blu-ray is so
slow-motion
clear.
drop.
I'm not sure what I had. I had this on my computer somehow.
I watched it on Blu-ray.
Did it actually stick out really bad in the Blu-ray? Or?
I mean, it was noticeable, but I'm very good at not giving a shit about that stuff because I watch so many old movies that it's like my kid watches it and she's like, "Oh my gosh, that looks so fake," and I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know, I'm used to it."
Yeah, I watched enough 80s and 70s horror and enough B horror currently that special effects have to be really, really bad for me to be judgy. The CGIing it to a certain degree does bother me.
Yeah, same with me.
Actually,
sorry.
What I was going to say earlier is like, is anybody else like when he dives for the elevator shaft and grabs that air vent by the tips of his fingers, and anybody else go, he broke his fingers on that?
I did not.
I think I might have done that.
There was a few things where I was like, yeah, that wouldn't really happen in real life. Like, I don't know what he was doing with that computer monitor and like explosives, but I'm pretty sure whatever it was that he did wasn't really accurately portrayed like how it would really be. But again, action movie, we can suspend our belief a little bit, I suppose.
Yeah, that kind of got me a little bit too, because it's like, wait a minute, how much C4 did he put in that thing?
Right.
Because it like blows out the entire floor of the building.
Uh-huh.
Like, wait, he only had like 2 pieces. Like, what?
And how did it detonate?
I don't remember many action films where the main hero guy ends up like basically pretty broken, bloody, and bleeding by the end of the film. You know, I mean, you see him dragging his feet as he's.
Yeah, he gets hurt. Yeah.
I think you do see that, but I think before this, you probably wouldn't have seen it as much. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes it a little more impactful. You see him getting torn up as all this stuff's happening to him.
First Blood. That's a good example. I can poignantly remember in First Blood him having to sew up his own wounds.
Oh, yeah.
Which bothered me a lot as a child. But he got torn up pretty badly in several areas in that as well. But not quite as badly as Bruce Willis's character. Bruce Willis looked like he went through a meat grinder.
Yeah, I remember Rambo looking like he could still get into action, like by the end of Rambo. Whereas
they mentioned
like, okay,
Rambo in this movie, wasn't there a small one-liner about that?
They did mention Rambo in this. I can't quite remember at what point they did it, but there was a joke about Rambo in there.
Yeah. And when the dudes were in the when the FBI dudes were in the helicopter, the one guy was like, "This feels like Saigon, man."
You were in middle school.
That felt like it came from another movie or something like that. So I wonder if that was like a reference to an earlier film.
Are you talking about when the FBI agents were flying overhead and they were,
and they're just like being dorks and playing around with the guns.
Like they've never been in a helicopter before.
We know what we're doing. We're so cool. Dies.
We're actors in a helicopter for the first time. Let's just improv this at this moment.
They did have one of my favorite lines in the movie, and that was where the younger of the two was introducing them. I'm Agent Johnson. This is Special Agent Johnson. No relation.
Like, well, yeah.
Did anyone else have anything else about any of the special effects that were in this film?
The whole initial cop raiding of trying to raid the building, that was a really cool thing where they had a lot of things, especially where they kept hitting. I mean, it ends in the giant explosion, but when they kept using the rocket launcher on the tank, where their joke is like, the police have brought in an RV.
And the whole movie is centered around this building. That's like the focus of the movie. It's, focused on one location.
Yeah, that is kind of cool.
I like that it was set in a one location, and then everybody had to come to it. Because that showed the kind of control that these men had over the people in the building and the people on the outside of the building as well. Even though much of the police force didn't know what the fuck was going on.
Yeah, it was a siege movie.
Very dumb
and
cop.
that was pretty. That added almost a comedy element to it, just how incompetent like the regular police actually were, except for the cop that in most other like movies would probably be like the jokey played for laughs character. Like he'd be the comic relief in another movie. Whereas
right, getting the donuts, he's the only one that knows what's going on.
Who's actually like listening.
So, moving on to the score and the movie.
I do have one quick thing about effects too. Seeing this made me want to play Rainbow Six Vegas again.
What is that, like a game?
Rainbow Six has, I believe, something to do with Tom Clancy.
Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Vegas. It's like a tactical shooter where you basically just like storm hostage situations. It's pretty great.
As far as the effects and such, is this where we'd also want to talk about the production? Because I do think the design of the floor where most of the action takes place was pretty cool. That's like this would be an interesting office to work in.
Yeah, it would be.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like the waterfall and the rocks and stuff, like where all the hostages were. That was cool.
Oh yeah, and then of course there were the air ducts that he ended up going through.
Mm-hmm.
The elevator shafts.
Were those air ducts or elevator ducts?
Well, he was in both, so he's crawling through the air ducts to escape, and then he was moving around with the elevator shafts too.
Well,
so, I mean, there were kind of a variety of, despite being in like one location, there were kind of a variety of different sets in this building that they had to.
It was like a maze.
Yeah, and this was a really elaborate place too. Like, what the hell kind of office building is this?
Although apparently I read that 20th Century Fox used their own under construction headquarters as where they filmed most of it. So I don't. They probably made it up to look fancier than it really is. I'm sure, but. But the whole still under construction at the top was apparently because the building was still under construction. So
it's the Fox building currently. I've seen a video on a YouTube channel where they went to it. It's over in Beverly Hills.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Interesting. Going on to the music and the score of the film, did it work with the film, do we think?
I don't actually remember the score.
Yeah. It was Christmas music for a lot of it.
Yeah, they use like Ode to Joy or something like that in there.
They do.
Oh yeah. Okay, now I remember. That was pretty great.
Which you don't really think of this movie as a typical Christmas movie.
The movie ends with "Let It Snow," and he's coming there for Christmas specifically, and it's a Christmas party that they're crashing.
Yeah, there's a lot of debate as to. Oh, go on.
I believe there's a "Let It Snow" part when the body gets dropped on Sergeant Powell's car, isn't it?
Well, and the sign on the dead body down the elevator is "Ho ho ho."
I now have a machine gun. Ho ho ho.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pickle Rick kind of stole a lot from this.
But yeah, actually, it was apparently the composer Michael Kamen was opposed to using Beethoven until the McTiernan, I think it was, said, well, that's what they used in Clockwork Orange. And he's like, oh.
You know what? That's exactly what I said during the film, because it was Beethoven's Ninth Symphony.
Or no, the ninth. It's been too long since I've seen Clockwork Orange. We need to do Clockwork Orange.
One of my all-time favorite films.
Well, the old
Yeah. Which is kind of unusual for me because I tend to really dislike Kubrick. That was Dane shriveling up and dying. Sorry, Dane.
Yeah, it was. I'm crushed.
Well,
Uh-oh.
we'll fight later.
Everyone's leaving.
Hold on.
What happened?
I will add them back on.
Well, in the meantime, there's some real contention about this actually being a Christmas movie. Like, some people swear up and down that it is definitely a Christmas movie, and they get mad if you disagree.
I know. I mean, I've got several people who believe that this is definitely a Christmas movie. I mean, Dane, I know you're one of them, right?
I think. Okay. First of all, I'm not the kind of person who will fight anybody if they, disagree with me on something. I'll debate, but I won't fight, whatever. But
If you look
so in other words,
at
I
it
don't.
from a technical standpoint, the plot revolves around Christmas, so technically yes.
Well, I think there's enough.
That's what I would think.
Throughout the movie, it's more action than.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing: the movie itself could exist outside of Christmas as a season, but there's enough Christmas about it that I think you could put it in there. Same with Batman Returns, because that's primarily a superhero film, but it's set at Christmas time. They mention it a lot. It's kind of
the finale is on Christmas Eve.
Yeah, and it's I don't know. It's there enough to where it's not incidental. As opposed to, say, something like the Harry Potter movies, which they touch on Christmas in a scene, but it's not. That's a scene. It's not the whole movie pretty much.
And I do agree that I would agree that it is a Christmas movie. It's just some people are really insistent when you bring it up. It's no, it's not a Christmas movie.
Well, there are some extremists out there. Let me tell you.
And these days, debate and fight are more or less the same kind of thing. So
that's not at all. That's not at all true. Not even remotely.
Hang out on political Twitter. It's a fun time.
I think because the debate is still ongoing, I would call it an unofficial Christmas movie.
I still get articles in my Facebook feed about it saying, "Oh, Die Hard is a Christmas movie," and people arguing over it.
I think it was either the screenwriter or the director said in a recent interview that it's not.
Each one of you individually, if you think that this is a Christmas movie, just say yes or no. Dane,
yes.
I say yes, but I'm also not gonna freak out if someone disagrees because I could see it either way. But for me personally, I think there's enough Christmas in it where you could justifiably put it in there.
Okay, Dustin, what do you think?
I think it's a fairly reasonable yes. I mean, it's not all about Christmas, but I mean, there's a heck of a lot of Christmas around, so yeah, yes.
Red Raven, what do you think? Do you think this
I would say yes.
Okay. What about you, Katie?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's a stupid thing for people to argue over, for starters. But it doesn't, I feel like a Christmas movie for me makes me nostalgic for the holiday. This doesn't necessarily do that. I'm way more focused on the story of what's happening within this building than I am about what time of year it's happening in, especially in LA. There's nothing really Christmassy about the atmosphere other than kind of bookending it in the beginning and the end of the movie. So
it's 85 all the time.
Yeah, jury's out for me on that one.
Okay. What do you think, Jake?
I think it definitely qualifies as a Christmas movie. I will say though that I've been amused more than anything by the debate.
I know, right?
I think when when Brandon and I did the video we did recently on non-traditional Christmas films, I nominated Die Hard, but I kind of regretted it because it's becoming a traditional film, I think. But it's still fringe for a lot of people. But I see it as one.
One of the most recent releases, like the package is a Christmas sweater.
What do you think, Brandon? Do you think that this is a Christmas movie?
Well, I think it is, and maybe it is because I have always watched it around Christmas time since the '80s. So, but then again, I could see where people could watch it any time of year. There's just so much iconography that says Christmas. I think in a subtle way.
I mean,
almost a subliminal way.
It was because of the debate that I was paying attention to how much Christmas actually came up. I mean, you've got the Christmas humor that goes with it. You've got the employees saying "Merry Christmas" to each other. You've got Hans Gruber saying, "Well, it is Christmas, the time of miracles." You got them chiming in on the fact that it's Christmas. You've got the guy who plays Carl Malone on Family Matters, singing or whistling to himself.
But then there's all that action in between that you just kind of...
Yeah.
Correct. It distracts you from the fact that it is set around Christmas time. There's more action going on than there is holiday theming going on. So is it in fact a Christmas movie?
It could go either way.
Yes.
Well,
See what I meant?
I think that's an answer best left to the individual. So
Let us know in the comments below.
right.
Yeah. The answers to life's persistent questions.
But
this is why I wanted to bring the debate up, because it's clearly a lot more heated when people really start hashing it out. And so it was worth addressing.
Here's the thing, though. I feel like this is important to say, is that a proper debate is you present your side, the other side presents its side, and you have, back and forth dialogue. A fight or an argument, is where people are just screaming at each other and nothing's getting done. So that's why I make a distinguish. I have to distinguish between the two.
Well,
I am letting it go.
What in fact do we consider a Christmas movie?
Something that has overt Christmas shit in it.
Okay. To me, a Christmas movie doesn't have to involve well, let's see. A very good example of a Christmas movie would probably be
Christmas Vacation.
Yeah.
Christmas Vacation. That was a Christmas movie. That was about Christmas, a Christmas gathering, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Was this more Siege than Christmas?
More Siege.
It was more action.
All right.
So you're trying to get us all to change our minds, or what are we doing?
I'm just wondering, is it?
If I had to choose, I would choose. It's leaning more towards more action. But yes, you could consider it a Christmas movie still.
So it's kind of
so it could go both ways.
It could go both ways. Alrighty. So, is there anything else that anyone else wanted to talk about the film? Any behind the scenes info that we had not mentioned or anything like that?
What was everybody's favorite scene? Did we already do that?
Favorite scene.
No, not really. Actually, my favorite scene is that part where the police officer comes to the building and he's about to leave and he throws the body off of the thing and it hits the car as he's backing away with all the gunfire.
Like, help! Oh God, help! He just like bumbles through like the first half of the scene. It's like, oh, nothing to see here. Oh my God, what's going on? Like that might be my favorite too. It's a strong contender for sure.
Ooh, I have a favorite.
You know, Let It Snow and then the body falling was interesting.
What was?
My favorite was a lot less action packed. It was when John McClane calls the emergency channel on the CB and like the 911 operator's like, "This is just for emergencies." And he's like, "No fucking shit, lady. You sound like I'm trying to order a pizza."
It's just like, wow, how are these people not being fired? Good Lord. They're so bad.
They're so inept.
I guess my favorite scene, I don't know why, is when he's talking to Reginald, what's his name? Carl Malone from Family Matters.
Carl Winslow, get it right.
Carl
Malone is a basketball player.
He's a basketball player from those Man Show skits, for Christ's sake.
This here, Carl Malone.
Reginald
I know, right?
I know.
I went and saw handball. There was no ball in this movie. It was just somebody eating someone's brains.
But anyways, when they were talking their family stuff, and you know, he said that, he ended up mentioning that he shot a 13-year-old. You know, hearing that, you know, and how he got to
demoted,
you know,
basically.
Correct, where he wasn't a beat cop.
Yeah, that gave that character some real like pathos. It's like, you know, like you make a mistake and then you kind of have to like pay for it and live with the regret. And that was kind of an interesting thing to look at least in today's context, where the cops are, well, things are different now, let's just say, than they were when this movie was made. And
or are they? Or are they just getting more reported?
I think they would have been more. I think it would have been more of a shameful thing to accidentally shoot someone like in the 80s. Like you could tell, like he felt guilty about it. Whereas these days,
So people today who accidentally shoot innocent people don't feel guilty about it.
Yeah,
and don't feel publicly shamed on social media by everyone.
They get publicly shamed. It's just.
I think that.
I think you know what I'm attempting to say here.
I don't think it really matches up with the realities of then or now, but
I think that in today's standards, police are looked at as you know, kind of the people that are supposed to protect us. So especially when the news has nothing.
I think it just gets more reported. It's more.
Well, they didn't have dash cams back then, and they didn't have chest cams either.
No.
I think the public perception. I think the idea is that the public perception is that there weren't a lot of these accidental shootings like this back then because not as many there. Whether it was the thing or not, that's a different item.
It's also a race thing too. Like people feel.
Yeah.
Are you okay? What?
I think her connection might have gave out.
Yeah, that's. She was getting kind of stretched there for a while too.
Yep.
Yeah, that's usually connection issues.
Well, I think she was going with there's typically like a race angle to like police shootings, which is its own very long debate that we definitely don't have time for right now.
Yeah,
correct.
So, but like my main point was, I mean, like I have it just felt like a different time, because I mean, I'm probably like a much bigger political junkie than anybody here, like watching news and current event stories with this.
I'm up there. I mean, I keep up with it pretty highly. But I mean, you're right in the sense that it was a different time as far as public perceptions of what the general public's role relative to the police's role was,
Like,
considering that we didn't have, like I said, dash cams, and people didn't have video cameras in their pockets either.
Right. Well, like my takeaway from it was that I have an easier time believing that in an accidental shooting like that, like the officer would be like a lot more remorseful, and it would be more of a shameful thing. Whereas, it seems like today it's, they're given like all kinds of pats on the back. It's like, oh, everybody makes mistakes. Don't worry about it.
I'm not sure that the facts really back you up on that, considering all the stories of shootings that happen where the police officer gets suspended or fired or put up on trial. I mean,
only after a huge amount of public pressure.
Well, but that's the point, is that people, the shame factor is there from the onset, and I'm speaking from personal experience because here in Charlotte, in 2016, we had the shooting of someone who. That shooting sparked the riots that happened here that got talked about on the debates, the second debate, the second presidential debate, and that caused a huge additional uproar about police brutality and about shooting someone who was supposedly unarmed and things like that. It's just I'm not sure that the facts really back you up on that in terms of how the relative to the shaming factor or relative to any kind of remorse that a police officer might feel.
I'm kind of trying to keep it short so that we don't go into like a 45-minute discussion on this.
Can we just say that more research should be done and not on a movie talk show?
Yes.
Right.
I've been trying to say that for like 5 minutes. Yeah.
Alrighty. So, is there anything else that anyone else wanted to talk about the film in general?
I didn't do my favorite scene. I like the hacker guy like chopping into the safe. Like you get to see like you get to spend some time with like one of these guys, and like he doesn't seem like an international criminal like a lot of these other guys, or like that kind of scary like tall dude who's just like physical monster man. Like you believe that this character exists. He's like, yeah, we're stealing money, I'm having a good time. And then the way that ends too, like the limo driver gets like his own moment where he like knocks that guy out. So it's like, oh, they're getting away. And he crashes into him, and he's like, and the guy's like, what? Whack! Ah! And he just goes down. Like I liked that guy's. I like both of those characters, like little miniature arcs, kind of,
I thought that the hacker was a great character myself.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Yeah. As far as my don't think I did mine either, but I think I touched on it earlier. I liked a lot of Rickman's scenes for different reasons. Like the one with Ellis, I just loved it because of that sarcasm. It just was so perfectly timed. I love his meeting with Willis, with McClane, because that was the way the two of them played off each other. And I kind of like the part where he actually killed off the guy, the Takagi, I think his name is, just because it was so sudden and so, he did give a warning, but still, I wouldn't have necessarily. I think the first time I saw the movie, I didn't expect him to pull through so rapidly with his threat. You know what I mean? It kind of showed what the stakes were. So I kind of like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it really that really threw people's expectations off, I bet, for what they thought Gruber's motivations were. It's like, okay, he's gonna hold the building for ransom. Oh, what's going on? He just totally shot that guy.
Dane, did you touch on your favorite scene?
Trying trying to think. I mean, I think I like the very first exchange that John McClane and Hans Gruber have over the walkie-talkie, and when he sends the body now down, saying that he has a machine gun. Because for as relatable as of a hero as John McClane is, I think that he has enough. He knows how to threaten villains in a way that, imagine if John McClane was the villain and the terrorists were like dumb teenagers in a slasher movie. It's like that's something that a slasher villain would do, so it's like,
like
well,
Tucker and Dale, we got your friend.
Well, it's just interesting that despite being a very relatable character, he has just that slightest little bit of touch of theatricality and intimidation tactics with which to get to our villains, which that's not something you see every day from really any movie protagonist. And so that's nice. Plus, just the way that the two talk to each other over the phone, they are clearly trying to learn about the other, but also intimidate the other. And we learn a lot about both characters and how, as is proper with good hero villain relationships, they're at cross purposes with each other, but they can't help but admire the other's intelligence and capability.
Okay.
Agreed. Good point.
Anyone else have a favorite that they wanted to share? Okay, then.
Go see Die Hard. It's great.
I think that completes our film discussion on Die Hard. So everyone, before we say our, let's go through our end things. Katie, why don't you go ahead and tell me a little bit about yourself and who you are?
All right, I'm Katie Cadaver from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I am a body positive horror artist and alternative model. You can find me on all the socials, Facebook, Twitter, Patreon, and Instagram at 3RDEYE0PEN. I'm also the makeup artist for horror punk band Rat Bat Spider. They are all over the socials as well, but you can also listen to their music at ratbatspider.bandcamp.com. And I'm a dead girl for Duggar's Dark Coffin Classics horror TV show. You can watch episodes at vimeo.com/ddcc. I also perform and produce for Grindhouse Tees Burlesque Productions. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Grindhouse Tees. I am also a Tromette with Trauma Entertainment, and you can check out Trauma at trauma.com. And I'm an editor for Movies Galore of Milwaukee, and we've been working on getting our schedule set up for the next 2 months, actually, for the podcast. And next week, we're going to be talking about Frozen, the horror movie, not the Disney animated movie, which could also be thought of as horror, depending on where
If you're a parent
from.
or not.
Right.
Well, and if they'd have gone in their original intended direction of having Elsa be a villain.
Oh, yeah.
Now, there's a meme that feels appropriate for this. It's like, do you know someone with kids? Do you hate that person? And the picture is just like, Frozen recorder set. Learn to play the recorder.
Well, I put on there the sing-along version, because what parent would subject themselves to that?
Parents with earplugs.
Alrighty, going over to Dustin. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I'm a horror collector and grad student here in Milwaukee. I try to show my collection off on Instagram, although I'm pretty inconsistent about posting, so find me on there, DHR Hunter, all one word. And buckle in for the ride. Yeah. Will he post something this month? You never know. I've also been working on starting up my own spin-off channel, The Crypt of Horrors, where we try to do pretty much the same thing, but in videos. So I have a couple unboxings up there now, and I have almost a dozen videos that I just need to finish editing before getting back up there. So I try to do like a few unique things, or at least talk about stuff that other people aren't, like horror comics from Ibon Press, for example. I also have plans to do some like kind of long form discussions similar to this with various or otherwise guests. So as soon as we can bang it out on the schedule, I've got horror comics artist and writer Tim Seeley lined up. We just need to get our schedules aligned. And, well, the first time I had an equipment failure, so need to fix that. But yeah, it's going to be an exciting year, and I got a lot planned for that. I'm also involved with the Movies Galore blog, and I want to put some interviews up fairly soon. So I'm sorry, something fell off of a shelf and I totally forgot what I was saying. So I'm the Crypt of Horrors on YouTube. I hang out on Twitter a lot. I'm the Crypt of Horrors there. I'm DHR Hunter, all one word, on Instagram. Follow me across all these different dimensions, and it'll be fun.
Awesome.
So who's next?
Dane, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do?
I am Dane Kyle, independent filmmaker out of Charlotte, North Carolina. I just did a bunch of short films, one of which was The Call of Cutlass, which is included in the anthology film Clownsploitation, which is on Troma Now right this minute. And then I just recently beefed up my IMDb page with all of these credits in all kinds of different avenues, like writer, producer, director, all these things that hadn't previously been on there, but I just was like, I need to beef it up. So now it's almost entirely up to date. I'm waiting on a few things that are beyond my control at this particular point, but won't be long before I have a more or less complete account of everything I've done. But right now I'm working on getting some killer spec scripts together to hopefully be developed and or sold. One of them actually has gotten some interest from a development / production company, so that's cool. And it's looking like things are going to be pretty promising for the future, on top of the web series, the Harley Quinn fan series that my girlfriend created and is starring in, called Asylum Origins Harley, which I directed. That's hopefully going to be wrapped up pretty soon and released by the summer. So stay tuned for that on YouTube.
Awesome.
Wheel.
Going over to Septum Sin. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yes, I run a YouTube channel called Septum Sin versus the World. We are a physical media centric channel, mostly concentrating on movies, but we do hit other avenues such as books, games, and music. One of our projects upcoming is going to be a top 15 list of musical themes. Themes basically without words. So we are looking forward to doing that. We should have that up by next week. Continuing to do some reviews. And I also have to say, I watched Clownsploitation not long ago, and I would recommend it to most, especially horror buffs.
Ooh, it's out?
On the Troma Now, anyway.
Ah.
And I've heard good things, or people have said good things about my segment, so I'm very appreciative.
Oh, sweet. I can actually check it out now.
I think better than I think Unfriended done a little bit better than it was originally.
Jake, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
All right, I'm Jake. I'm here in Central Virginia. I frequently guest on Septum Sin versus the World, and we do have a big video coming up that we're looking forward to. It's going to be a lot of fun. I still have a number of videos I'm trying to get edited. I want to get posted soon, but hopefully sooner than later. I do have my own solo channel, Kotobuki Jake, which I sporadically update. And then Ben, it's kind of a slow time year right now in a lot of ways. So trying to get some writing done, and definitely that's about all for now.
Alrighty. And my name is David Streggy. I run Inside Movies Galore, but I run it with all of you. So thank you so much for helping me start a new year. I also blog at Movies Galore of Milwaukee, as well as being a producer of over 9 feature films and short films that are out there. So please check some of those out. Wrestle Massacre being one, Witchtown, and Video Box, which I believe you can find open on Vimeo. So, but stay tuned as maybe Dane and I will finish up some film projects coming out this year. I know it's been slow and painful, but we'll get there. And I think everybody needs to say just one thing here: yippee-ki-yay, motherfuckers! Everyone,
you want me to actually say
motherfucker?
it? Motherfucker.
All right. Good night, everyone, and please. Like and subscribe, and thank you for listening and watching. We
share too. That's important.
Definitely. If anything, take a look at the new schedule that is up on the page. So stay tuned, everyone. We have a great year planned.